What is the false consensus effect? The false consensus effect occurs when we overestimate the number of other people who share our opinions, beliefs, and behavior. Individuals tend to believe that others are more similar to them, but in reality, it isn't what it seems to be. The false consensus effect is likely to happen usually when we are considering opinions, beliefs, and behaviors that are important to us. The false consensus effect is also known as consensus bias, which is a pervasive cognitive bias. The cognitive bias is an error in the human mind when they are processing and interpreting information that affects their decision and judgments.
Moving on to the background of the experiment. False consensus effect experiment was found and conducted by a psychologist named Professor Lee Ross from Stanford University. In the 1977, social psychologist Professor Lee Ross conducted 2 studies meant to show how the false consensus effect works. Ross coined the term that the false consensus effect (FCE) to describe the tendency to see one's own behavioral choices and judgments as relatively common and inappropriate to existing circumstances, while viewing alternative responses as uncommon, deviant, or inappropriate. In the first study, participants were asked to read about the situation in which a conflict occurred and then told the 2 alternative ways of responding to the situation. They were asked to do 3 things. 1. Guess which option other people would choose. 2. Say which option they themselves would choose. 3. Describe the attributes of the person who would likely choose each of the 2 options. The results evidently show that the most of the subject had thought that other people would do the same as them, regardless of which of the 2 responses they actually choose themselves. This validates the phenomenon of false consensus effect, where an individual thinks that other people think the same way they do, when they actually often don't. We can learn that the phenomenon of false consensus effect validates the fact that people have the tendency to judge how people make decisions based on how they would make their own, and if other people do decide to do otherwise, they view them as someone defective or unacceptable.
Now, let's find out the reasons why false consensus effect happened. The first reason is egocentric bias. People spend most of the time seeing things from their own perspective, so it's no wonder that they struggle to shift from this perspective when assessing other people's viewpoint. This form of anchoring and adjustment problem leads to other cases of assumed similarity in situations where people attempt to assess other people's perspective. The second reason is selective exposure. People tend to spend more time interacting with individuals who share their opinions and behaviors than with those who do not, hence the word selective. This gives people a distorted view of what the average person is like, since most of the individuals that they engage with share their perspective and act in a relatively similar manner. Next is motivational process. People generally want to believe that their thoughts and actions are normal and prevalent. This form of motivated social projection is an example of a self-serving bias, since it allows people to enhance their self-esteem by making them feel that they conform with others. Not only that, the effect is also stronger in instances when they are very sure that their beliefs, opinions, or ideas are the correct ones. Lastly, focus of attention. Let's be real, people are generally more focused on what they are thinking than on what others are thinking. This has caused them to assume that others are thinking the same thing that they are, thus leading to false consensus effect.
So you already know the definition and factors that influence the false consensus effect, also known as FCE. Now let's look at the characteristics of people influenced by the FCE. Firstly, individuals who assume that everyone else shares the same opinions or beliefs as them. In other words, these individuals expect that other people think the same way they do when actually in fact they don't. Besides, people with FCE view others who have different opinions from them as somewhat defective or unacceptable. They also only pay attention to news or stories that confirm their opinions. By knowing these characteristics, you could detect a person that is influenced by the false consensus effect. That person might be your friend, your parents, brother or sister, teacher, or perhaps it could be you. There are a few examples of FCE in daily life that you might be familiar with. People who believe that the earth is flat. Because they have a strong opinion regarding this, although the fact stated that the earth is round. This fact is seen as unacceptable to them because they stick to their opinion although it's already approved in science. Another common example of FCE is when you think the dress looks good on you but it doesn't. For instance, when you go shopping with your friends, you tried this one dress and you said, "I look outstanding in it." Your friends might seem to agree with you, but they actually don't. They didn't say it out loud because your opinion is seen as major in the group. If they disagree, you, as a person influenced by the FCE, will view them as unacceptable because, well, you couldn't accept their opinion.
And so, that wraps up our brainstorming session for this experiment. I hope that these questions can help you to understand the false consensus effect a lot more. Question number 1. Based on the presentation that you have watched, do you think that the false consensus effect is still practiced till this day? Share your thoughts. So, what do you think? Does the false consensus effect still exist in our community? The answer is yes. And let me explain to you why. Generally, we could still encounter this effect almost everywhere in this world. It is not something new for us to learn or witness, as this effect has been practiced since many decades ago. For example, not everyone in this world shares the same beliefs, thoughts, or opinions like ours, and most of them are strongly against us in many different ways. Thus, this has led to many conflicts and arguments with our peers in our daily life. Can you relate to the experiment from our presentation? No? It is alright. We can still explain it to you through this next question. Question number 2. If you are placed in a situation where you believed that Batman is better than Iron Man, but majority thought otherwise, and some points have been proved, are you still going to agree to that statement? So, have all of you made your choices? Well, if you're still not agreeing with them, then you are experiencing the false consensus effect. The reason is because you chose not to agree with other people's opinions and to stand to your own beliefs. For instance, you believe that Iron Man has more flaws and weaknesses than Batman has, so when others shared their own perspectives of why they disagree, you chose to stand against it. Hence, this definitely shows that you are being defective and judgmental, as you cannot accept someone's point of view that are against yours.